Having dedicated so much of your life to the American military and having dedicated so much of your life to the Democrat Party, I mean, I suppose the title of your book gives a pretty clear indication where your alliances lie and how you have evolved. But you must love, to a degree, both of these institutions. And yet, one of the main reasons you've left the Democrat Party is because you say they are a party of warmongers now. Can you tell me how the establishment's foreign policy has become divorced from the interests of the American people, the interests of the world, and even from the interests of the American military?
Well, thank you, first of all. Just for the purpose of clarity, my love is for our country. And the reason why I serve in our military now for over 21 years, serving as an officer in the U.S. Army Reserve currently, is motivated by that love of country and wanting to be of service. My time over 20 years in the Democratic Party, I joined in 2002. I was 21 years old. I saw back then a party of free speech, a big tent party that welcomed people with different backgrounds, different religions, different views, that stood up for civil liberties and free speech, even for people they disagreed with. And it was a party that fought for the little guy. You fast forward to where we are today, that party has become wholly unrecognizable. And so just as my being part of the Democratic Party was driven by my love of country and my desire to serve, so too was my decision to leave the party, because it has become a party that stands diametrically opposed to the fundamental principles of freedom that make this country the great country that it is.
I've spoken to a number of West Point veterans, military personnel, former and current, and it seems to me that there is a pervasive sentiment throughout the US military of powerful anti-establishment feeling, that they believe that the government is out of control, that numerous wars that your country has been involved in and remains involved in either through aid or direct military involvement are, putting it succinctly, corrupt. Do you feel that there's a real danger that the military could become an anti-establishment force, that patriotism in America now means not the love of your government, but as you have described, a love of your nation, distinct, discrete, and very definitively separate from your government?
Yeah, I think that the prevailing sentiment is because oftentimes those who serve and wear the uniform, they understand the costs of the decisions that politicians make and have the clarity to be able to see that even as we have a civilian-led military, as we should, when you have politicians, too often from both political parties, who are putting their own self-interests first, who are putting the party's interests first, or as we see very often, the interests of the military-industrial complex first. Nothing could be more offensive and insulting to a service member willing to lay down their lives in service to our country, to have a politician who has the power to send us to war, not caring about our country at all, and not asking the most basic question is this decision? Do we get involved in this war or that war? Do we go and wage this war, or do we choose peace and diplomacy? Those decisions are not very often being made answering the question, does this actually serve our national security interests? Does this serve the interests and the well-being of the American people?
Both Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump, in their own ways, of course to a different degree, are enjoying extraordinary success. And perhaps it's reductive to say that both are regarded as anti-establishment figures. I know that there are detractors of both who would deny that. And I know that the Biden critiques of Trump would be that he's crazy, and the establishment critiques of Bobby Kennedy would be that he's a crazy pro-vaxxer and all of that kind of stuff. But does not the rise of both of these figures suggest that there is a deep yearning for significant change in American cultural and political life?
No question about it.
Then I know that both of these parties are at least purported to have courted you, your support and your membership, maybe even as vice president in both cases. I wonder if you believe that either one of those purviews could represent the kind of change that America requires on the basis of your analysis of deterioration during the time that you've been involved, in particular with the institution of the Democrat Party?
Yeah, it's very telling. There was a Gallup poll that was done a couple of weeks ago that showed 43% of Americans don't identify with either party. That we've seen how that number is growing over time. And really, so it shows the minority of Americans identify with the Democrat Party or identify with the Republican Party. And even those who still identify with those parties, I meet people all the time, talk to people almost every day who are disenfranchised Republicans, who are disenfranchised Democrats. Most Americans very frustrated because we see too often a system, and currently the party that's in power again, who is not looking after the interests of the American people. How this election season shakes out, we will see. But I agree with your analysis that more Americans recognize how deeply rooted the corruption and the rot is within our government, both in elected officials as well as those who've either been appointed or are bureaucrats who are acting for their own self-interest instead of the interest of the people. And so while that is a very bad thing, the fact that more and more people are waking up to it because they're seeing the consequences impacting their everyday lives, their families, their communities. The hope is that, and my hope is that this is an election where we can actually bring about serious change.
Plainly, you'd prefer either of those candidates to the current incumbent of the White House. Which would you vote for?
I'm focused on, in my book, in delivering the message of my experience within the Democratic Party, the danger that the Biden-Harris administration pose to our fundamental rights and freedoms, and how they are undermining our democracy. Once we get a little bit closer to Election Day, I'll share my plans.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's something you have to be careful about because it's still divisive. And do you suppose that even between Trump and RFK now there will be more hostility rather than a kind of alliance based on the idea that, in spite of, in each instance, indicators that in some regards they are supporters of establishment edicts, such as Trump voting for that being supportive, of that $95 billion aid bill, and Bobby Kennedy's position perhaps on Middle Eastern conflict, that ultimately they will sort of turn on one another. I don't know much about how your politics works, particularly when it heads into the sort of white heat of November. Is it for you a difficult thing to get involved in?
Well, for me, it's more so about where I feel that I can make the most positive impact. I left the Democratic Party. I have a message that I can deliver that shares my experiences, that talks about in detail, the very real consequences, not of saying, well, the Democrat approach to education versus the Republican approach to education. For example, I tackle these issues like freedom of speech, like the rule of law, how increasingly the Democrat elite are fomenting racism in our country and tearing us apart, looking at each of these issues in detail so that voters can recognize the problem, first of all. In order to be able to find a solution, we have to first correctly diagnose the problem. And I left the Democratic Party because they are the party that is undermining freedom and willing to sacrifice the rule of law, our democracy, and so forth in their pursuit of power. There's been some back and forth between President Trump and Bobby Kennedy. I know both of them. We'll see how things shake out, but it's clear that President Trump, as the presumptive Republican nominee, is in a far better position and a far stronger position to defeat Joe Biden than Bobby Kennedy.
Hey, this is exciting. We've got a great partner today. It's Rumble. But beyond Rumble, it's Rumble's latest venture. Let me ask you first, are you a Sleepy Joe type character with zero cognitive performance, struggling to muster focus and brain power for basic things like running the United States of America? You've got to stop drinking woke liberal coffee that hates you and your way of life and start your day by drinking Rumble's very own 1775 coffee. This is going to be the best tasting coffee you've ever had. Seriously good, ethically sourced from a family farm in the high altitude mountains of Bolivia. Not in the Bolivian lowlands run not by a family but by a single man still living with a pet. No! Instead of waking up and drinking your big corporation owned woke ideology coffee that's probably making you sick from the pesticides it's sprayed with, try Rumble's 1775 revolutionary coffee. Support freedom of speech. Build a parallel economy that actually values you and loves you. My favourite? It's dark, of course. I've always found the lure of the dark irresistible. I'm sorry, how can I stay mad at you? You're just going to have to wait over there for a little while. Level up your morning routine with a 1775 coffee. Sleep all night knowing your hard-earned dollary dues are going towards supporting freedom-loving creators like me on Rumble. Visit 1775coffee.com now, pick up your first bag, use the code BRAND to save 10% on your first order. Oh, come on. Why choose, Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.